Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the national anthems of the Kingdom of Morocco and the United States of America. Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I am now delighted to introduce our MC for this opening ceremony, Florie Lizer, President and CEO, Corporate Council on Africa. Kindly help me welcome her to the podium.
Your Excellencies, Your Excellency President Masisi, honorable ministers and other government officials, heads of delegations, Corporate Council on Africa board members, CCA member companies and organizations, esteemed members of the private sector and other organizations, all protocols observed. It is my distinct privilege to welcome you to the 14th U.S.-Africa Business Summit, and we are honored by the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. I extend my deep gratitude to the Kingdom of Morocco for being our national host for this summit, which acknowledges the commitment of Morocco to the development of its home continent and also underscores the strong strategic and historical partnership that links the Kingdom of Morocco with the United States. I am pleased to introduce His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation, and Moroccan expatriates of the Kingdom of Morocco, the Honorable Nasser Bourita, to formally open the summit.
أصحاب الفخامة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، أود في البداية أن أرحب بكم جميعا في هذه النسخة 14 من القمة الأعمال الأمريكية الإفريقية التي شرفها صاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس نصره الله برعايته السامية. أتقدم بالشكر لشاركنا مجلس الشركات الأمريكي حول إفريقيا على الدور الكبير الذي قام به للتحضير الجيد لهذا المؤتمر وتنظيم فعالياته. إن الحضور القوي لأكثر من 1000 مشارك يبرز المؤهلات والآفاق الهامة والواعدة للشراكة بين إفريقيا والولايات المتحدة في مجال التجارة والاستثمار والأعمال، كما يؤكد أهمية القطاع الخاص ومؤسسات التنمية والاستثمار كرافعة أساسية لهذه الشراكة. ويكتسي انعقاد هذه القمة على أرض المملكة المغربية دلالات متعددة، فهو أولاً تجسيد لالتزام المغرب الكامل تحت قيادة جلالة الملك محمد السادس بانتمائه الطبيعي لإفريقيا وحرصه على مواكبة استقرارها وتنميتها الاقتصادية المستدامة. وهو ثانياً تعبير عن نضج الشراكة الاستراتيجية المغربية الأمريكية التي بقدر تطورها على المستوى الثنائي تسهم بشكل مباشر وفعال في خدمة الأمن والاستقرار في فضاءات جغرافية أخرى، خاصة إفريقيا والشرق الأوسط. فالعلاقات المغربية الأمريكية تتميز بقوتها وغناها وريادتها على المستوى الإفريقي. فإذا كان من المعروف أن المملكة المغربية تاريخياً هي أول دولة اعترفت باستقلال الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، فإنها أيضاً الدولة الإفريقية الوحيدة التي لها اتفاق للتبادل الحر مع الولايات المتحدة، كما أنها من الدول التي تتوفر على شراكة استراتيجية متينة ومتعددة الأبعاد مع هذا البلد الصديق، شراكة تسمح اليوم بأن يمتد التعاون وبكل ثقة وثبات ليشمل القارة الإفريقية برمتها. كما أن هذا التنظيم في المغرب يعد تكريسا لدور المغرب الطبيعي كبوابة لإفريقيا وحلقة وصل مع شركائها العالميين كأوروبا والولايات المتحدة وأمريكا الجنوبية، وذلك لما تحظى به المملكة من ثقة ومصداقية على الصعيدين القاري والدولي. أصحاب الفخامة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، إذا كان انعقاد هذا الاجتماع يتزامن مع فترة أمل في انقشاع جائحة كوفيد، فإنه يصادف أيضاً مرحلة يشهد فيها الاقتصاد العالمي اضطرابات عميقة طالت سلاسل الإنتاج والاستثمار والمبادلات، وأنتجت تضخماً وضغوطاً اقتصادية مثيرة للقلق، وهو ما يحتم أكثر من أي وقت مضى التمسك بالتعاون والشراكة كسبيل وحيد لضمان الأمن والسياسة وانسيابية التجارة والحفاظ على ثقة المستثمرين. وفي هذا السياق المليء بالتحديات والتي يشهد إعادة تشكيل معالم الاقتصاد الدولي، يبرز دور القارة الإفريقية باعتبارها خزاناً للنمو بالنسبة للاقتصاد العالمي وحليفاً قوياً لشركائها الدوليين. فإذا كان الأمن الغذائي في صميم المشاغل العالمية اليوم، فإن إفريقيا تمتلك أكثر من 23% من الأراضي الزراعية في العالم، وهو ما يؤهلها لتكون من بين أهم الفاعلين في الأمن الغذائي. وإذا كان المستقبل هو للطاقات المتجددة، فإن القارة الإفريقية لديها إمكانيات شمسية تبلغ 10 تيغاوات و350 جيجاوات من الطاقة الكهرومائية و110 جيجاوات من الطاقة الرياح و15 جيجاوات من مصادر الطاقة الحرارية الأرضية. وإذا كان رأس المال البشري هو الثروة الرئيسية للاقتصاديات، فإن إفريقيا هي أكثر القارات العالم شباباً، وتكمن أكبر ثرواتها في سكانها التي ستصل حصتهم من البالغين سن العمل 42% بحلول عام 2100. وبفضل ما تزخر به القارة من رأس مال بشري وموارد طبيعية واعتبارا لسوقها المستقبلية المهيكلة والمترابطة في إطار منظمة التجارة الحرة القارية الإفريقية، ولتجمعاتها الاقتصادية الإقليمية ونموها الاقتصادي البالغ معدله 6%، فإن إفريقيا تمتلك مؤهلات تجعلها قادرة على مواجهة الأزمات، وتمكنها من تعزيز سيادتها في القطاعات ذات الأهمية الاستراتيجية الكبرى كالصحة والأمن الغذائي والطاقة والبنيات التحتية، بما يضمن تحقيق نمو شامل وتنمية عادلة ومنصفة. وتستوجب هذه المقاربة أن يطلع الفاعلون الاقتصاديون الخواص بدورهم المحوري في تحريك عجلة الاقتصاد، حيث أن الفاعلين الخواص يمثلون 80% من إجمالي الإنتاج في القارة وثلثي إجمالي الاستثمار، فمن الضروري تحفيز القطاع الخاص وفتح المجال لإمكاناته الفعالة من خلال المزيد من التمويل للشركات الصغرى والمتوسطة التي لا تتلقى حالياً إلا 10% من القروض المصرفية. أصحاب الفخامة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، لقد آن الأوان كي تجني إفريقيا ثمار مؤهلاتها وإمكاناتها العديدة وشبابها النابض بالحيوية، وتنهض بدورها المحوري والطبيعي على الساحة الدولية وفي التطورات الكبرى الجارية على الصعيد العالمي. فإذا كانت الثروات والمؤهلات التي تزخر بها دول إفريقيا نعمة تصنع غنى القارة وتفردها، فإنها أيضا مسؤولية على عاتق دولها وحكوماتها، وتحد لروح الإبداع والمقاولة لدى فاعليها الاقتصاديين من أجل تحقيق المسار المفضي إلى النمو الشامل والتنمية المستدامة، وتحقيق مبتغى انتصار الشعوب على آفات التخلف والفقر والإقصاء كما قال صاحب الجلالة. ولم يسبق أن كنا في حاجة أمس مما نحن إليه اليوم من أجل بناء اقتصاد إفريقي يتطلع إلى المستقبل، يستمد قوته من اندماجه في منظومة التجارة العالمية وسلاسل القيمة الدولية، اقتصاد سليم ومتين يعطي الأولوية للتصنيع والتشغيل وخلق القيمة، بما يكفل لقارتنا موقعا لائقا على الخريطة الاقتصادية الدولية. وهذا لن يتسنى إلا بشرطين: أولا، قيام الدول الإفريقية بالإصلاحات الاقتصادية الضرورية لخلق مناخ الأعمال مناسب وقيام القطاع الخاص بدوره الوطني، ومن جهة ثانية تعبئة الشركاء الدوليين للقارة لمواكبة برامج التنمية لدولها. فبالتوازي مع التعبئة الجماعية لكل البلدان الإفريقية لجعل الاندماج رافعا لتحويل اقتصاداتها، يقتضي التعاطي مع التحديات التي تواجهها القارة انخراطا عمليا وصادقا للشركاء الدوليين. إن لإفريقيا شراكات مع العديد من الفاعلين الدوليين، غير أن نجاح تلك الشراكات لا يجب أن يقاس أبدا بعدد برامجها واجتماعاتها، بل يجب أن يقاس بعدد المشاريع الملموسة التي تتمخض عنها، ويجب أن يقاس بأثرها الفعلي على مسارات التنمية في الدول الإفريقية. فكما قال جلالة الملك محمد السادس: إن قارتنا ليست في حاجة للمساعدات بقدر ما تحتاج لشراكات ذات نفع متبادل. فإفريقيا تحتاج اليوم إلى شركاء دوليين فاعلين حقيقيين، شركاء يرافقون ولا يملون، شركاء يبنون على المدى الطويل ولا يقتصرون على استغلال الفرص قصيرة الأجل. كما يجب إعطاء أهمية خاصة لتمويل المقاولات الصغيرة والصغيرة جدا. لذا نقترح إرساء آلية لتتبع تنفيذ المشاريع المتمخضة عن الشراكة الأمريكية الإفريقية، وخلق تسهيلات لولوج التمويلات وفق مقاربة تضع نصبها ضمان النجاح والفعالية في التعامل مع المشاريع لبلوغ نتائج ملموسة وتحقيق تطور قابل للقياس، بما يسهم في تطوير العلاقات اقتصادية مثمرة بين الولايات المتحدة والدول الإفريقية. أصحاب الفخامة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، حضرات السيدات والسادة، إن المغرب بقيادة جلالة الملك محمد السادس يعتز بالانتماء إلى قارته إفريقيا ويؤمن بمستقبلها، وإخلاصاً لانخراطه الفاعل في بناء الوحدة الإفريقية منذ سنة 1961، فإن المغرب ماضٍ في تعبئته المتواصلة من أجل انبثاق قارة إفريقية واثقة من إمكانياتها ومنفتحة للمستقبل، وفاءً للالتزام الذي قطعه جلالة الملك محمد السادس بنهج سياسة متناسقة ومتكاملة تجاه أشقائنا الأفارقة ترتكز على الاستثمار المشترك للثروات والنهوض بالتنمية البشرية وتعزيز التعاون الاقتصادي. لذا فإن المغرب جعل التعاون الثلاثي في صلب العمل المشترك مع الولايات المتحدة وإفريقيا، إيمانا منه بأن روابط الثقة والتعاون التي تجمع المغرب بكل منهما لا بد أن تستثمر في دينامية خلاقة للتنمية على أساس التكامل وتضافر الإمكانيات والجهود. وكما أكد جلالة الملك في العديد من المناسبات، فإذا كان شمال المغرب يمثل حلقة الوصل مع الشركاء في أوروبا، فإن الأقاليم الجنوبية للمملكة مؤهلة لتكون منصة للعلاقات المغربية الإفريقية الأمريكية، لا سيما على المستوى الاقتصادي. كما أن الولايات المتحدة التي ما فتئت تساند قضايا القارة الإفريقية منذ استقلال دولها، كانت ولا تزال شريكاً مهماً لإفريقيا، شريكاً يتقاسم معها جزءاً من تاريخها وجزءاً من جغرافيتها كذلك عبر المحيط الأطلسي، ويتعاون مع دولها فرادى وجماعات في جميع الميادين وعلى جميع المستويات. وإني واثق من أن العلاقات الإفريقية الأمريكية لها اليوم من المؤهلات والآفاق ما يمكنها من الإسهام النوعي في الإقلاع الإفريقي المشترك والاستثمار الأمثل لأوجه التكامل والتآزر المفيد للجميع. ونأمل أن يكون اجتماعنا هذا علامة تحول كبرى في مسار الشراكة الإفريقية الأمريكية في مجال الأعمال والتجارة والاستثمار، بما يدعم دور القطاع الخاص والفاعلين الاقتصاديين ويسهم في إنجاح القمة الأمريكية الإفريقية المرتقبة في دجنبر 2022 وإغناء أجندتها. أتمنى النجاح لهذا المنتدى وأشكركم على حسن إصغائكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
My deepest appreciation to His Excellency, the Minister, for those wonderful remarks. And I must also add our gratitude for the tremendous partnership of his ministry team for their remarkable work to make this summit a reality. I now invite the Honorable Alice Albright, the CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation of the United States, to the podium to introduce a video message from Her Excellency, the Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
Good morning. I'm just delighted and honored to be heading the delegation from the United States to the 14th Annual U.S.-Africa Business Summit, where I am joined by senior leaders across the U.S. government. As the CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, one of the 17 government agencies that contributes to Prosper Africa initiative, I am so excited to be here in Marrakech to feature our partnership both with the government of Morocco and also to meet with so many partners from across the continent. I'd like to extend my warm thanks to Flory and everybody at the Council, the Corporate Council on Africa, as well as from the government of Morocco for bringing us all together, and all of the other government and private sector partners who have traveled to Marrakech for this very important summit. I'll have more to say about the work that lies ahead over the next 2 days, but before I do, I want to introduce a very, very special guest who could not be with us here in person, but also who wanted to extend her warm support for and reinforce the importance of this gathering. Colleagues, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris, who will be joining us by video.
Greetings from Washington, D.C. I want to thank the Corporate Council on Africa, the Kingdom of Morocco, and His Majesty King Mohammed for hosting the 2022 U.S.-Africa Business Summit. I'm honored to participate in this opening ceremony. President Joe Biden and I recognize the critical importance of strengthening our relationship with countries across Africa. To that end, I will start with some very important news. President Biden and I are looking forward to welcoming leaders from across the African continent to Washington, D.C. from December 13th through the 15th for the United States-Africa Leaders Summit. This summit will demonstrate America's enduring commitment to our African partners, and it will be based on principles of mutual respect and shared interests and values. And a critical part of this summit will be to bolster our economic relationship. Which brings me to the importance of this gathering of public and private sector leaders in Marrakech. I believe in the power of public-private partnerships, partnerships that bring together the experience and the expertise of the private sector with the mission of government to act for the public good and with the public trust, and the reach and capacity that governments can give uniquely to any endeavor. By working together, we can unleash growth and opportunity that far exceeds what either the public or private sector can achieve on its own. And as everyone here knows, there is so much opportunity for economic growth in Africa and, of course, in the United States when we collaborate and coordinate. Africa is the world's fastest growing continent. By 2030, the continent will have 1.7 billion people, home to 1/5 of the world's population. The continent also is increasingly young, urban, and connected. There is a growing demand for food, healthcare, education, technology, and infrastructure. Yet, barriers remain. Limited access to capital, the high cost of financing, and legal and regulatory bottlenecks. This is on top of the global challenges that I know are felt acutely in Africa, including recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and food insecurity. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to working with all of you to address these issues in furtherance of the African Union's Agenda 2063. With regard to food insecurity, we are focused on the urgent need to increase food production and exports with and within Africa, a challenge made worse by Putin's war in Ukraine. To this end, since last October, the United States has pledged more than $7 billion in humanitarian and food security assistance across Africa. More broadly, our administration's goal is to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth and development across the continent, to expand capital flows, and to promote the vibrant spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation that is so prevalent across Africa. I am pleased to see the advances made in implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we will work with you to ensure its success. The United States is committed to bring to bear all the tools at our disposal, including development financing, grants and technical assistance, and support for legal and regulatory reforms, all to help our African partners thrive. As part of this, our signature investment initiative in Africa, Prosper Africa, has convened a delegation to be with you in Marrakech, led by Millennium Challenge Corporation CEO Alice Albright. It includes officials from 10 U.S. government departments and agencies. It also includes a group of investors who collectively manage more than $1 trillion in assets. Over the coming days, our delegation will discuss with you a range of issues. This includes work to advance our new global infrastructure initiative and our work to mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars for high-quality, sustainable infrastructure investment. It also includes our effort to expand Power Africa, one of our largest public-private partnerships in the world. This work will increase access to electricity support a just energy transition, and more. This week's convening is very important. When everyone is at the table, we are better able to collaborate, coordinate, and identify new opportunities. So I wish you a productive summit in Marrakech. This work will benefit United States-African business ties and diplomatic ties. And most importantly, it will benefit both the people of Africa and the people of the United States. Thank you.
Well, as you've just heard the Vice President state, we are all here, all invested in creating more pathways to prosperity across the African continent. Through Prosper Africa, the U.S. government's initiative to increase trade and investment and promote sustainable development across the continent, and our collective efforts, we are strengthening partnerships to ensure that people on both sides of the Atlantic have the opportunity to create a better life for their children, their families, and their communities, and to realize their full potential. Since Prosper Africa was launched 2 years ago, the U.S. government has supported 800 two-way trade and investment deals covering 45 different countries with an estimated value of $50 billion. Yet, we can and we must do more. From the pandemic to the recovery from its devastating economic impact to the climate crisis, Africa is essential to our collective progress as we work to tackle the complex challenges of the day. The Biden-Harris administration has made deepening our engagement with Africa a priority. The United States is committed to further strengthening our partnerships to foster inclusive and sustainable economic growth and prosperity, expand opportunities for bilateral trade and investment, and promote respect and shared values. That is why we are continuing to work to build stronger ties with our African partners, to catalyze infrastructure investments and public-private partnerships across the African continent. We will also continue to work to support efforts to accelerate policy and regulatory reforms that are needed to attract investment. The U.S. government is committed to leveraging the full suite of tools in its toolkit, capitalizing on the unique skills of departments and agencies across our government, many of whom are here today, including MCC, the agency that I have the honor of being in charge of, as well as the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, the Departments of State, Agriculture and Commerce, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the United States Export-Import Bank, as well as Prosper Africa and Power Africa, all helping to harness the power of the U.S. private sector as well towards our shared goals. At the recent G7 summit meeting in Germany, leaders formally announced the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, known as PGII, to mobilize hundreds of billions of dollars and deliver quality, sustainable infrastructure that makes a difference in people's lives around the world. The United States aims to mobilize $200 billion for PGII over the next 5 years through grants, financing, and leveraging private sector investments. Through Prosper Africa and the work of the departments and agencies represented here today, we will work to deliver on PGII's promise by catalyzing investment across the African continent. MCC's distinct role is to reduce poverty through inclusive and sustainable economic growth. We do this through a shared partnership based on a model that pairs large-scale investments in critical infrastructure with policy and institutional reforms that together will attract private sector investment. We are building on long-standing partnerships with African partners through which the United States has made significant investments that have helped create 21st century jobs for African youth across the continent, deliver clean water and sanitation to help fight disease, made transportation more efficient through the construction of hundreds of kilometers of roads, improved agricultural yields by bringing irrigation to farmers, and increased access to reliable electricity for households and businesses alike. We've also increased our focus on strengthening resilience to global shocks and working with our African partners to help enhance their capacity to deliver for their people through investments in gender equity as a driver of inclusive growth, climate adaptation and mitigation, infrastructure, and digital technologies that have the potential to transform healthcare, financial services, agribusiness, and so much more. We all know that the impact that we can have when governments and the private sector work together to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. And that is what we are here to do, to build new partnerships, explore new opportunities to work together to address the challenges of the day today and those not yet before us, and to deliver on the promise of creating opportunities for a better life for future generations. Thank you all again for your continued partnership. Let's have a wonderful conference. And let me thank again the government of Morocco for its wonderful hospitality and all of our friends at CCA, Flory, and all your team and your board. You've done a wonderful job. Thank you so much for all the hard work. Thank you.
What an exciting announcement by Vice President Kamala Harris of the dates of the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in December, and her reinforcement of the importance of this summit here in Marrakech to build on the benefits of trade, investment, and commercial engagement for the people of Africa as well as the people of the United States. And CEO Albright, thank you for your remarks, and may I commend the Millennium Challenge Corporation for its excellent work globally and particularly here in Africa. We now turn to a video from Morocco Now, the Moroccan Investment and Export Agency.
Now is the time to ask the right questions. In any endeavor, there's always the ground and the tipping point. Ensuring stability for a high economy takeoff. People's trust towards their leaders and towards their will to uplift their societies. Investing in people to a better life. Giving an opportunity to develop their skills, their goals, and their vision to the world. Building infrastructure to connect within and reach the world. Calling for openness and make sure you have partners to trade with. And then there is the uniqueness. It could be your history. It could be your diversity. It could be how strategically you're located. It could be your culture. It could also be your dedication, or it could be your natural resources. But first and foremost, to reach the heights, you need a vision. Great ambitions. Stay focused and stick to the plan. Build upon the assets. Value the old and embrace the new. Keep on growing talents to face challenges. Always be sure you can fuel the growth and that you have partners to overcome drawbacks together. Now is the time to be ahead. Now is the time for agility and sustainable acts. Now is your time.
Well, that was a very energizing video underscoring the need for strategic vision to drive investment and economic development. I now invite to the podium Mr. Shakib Alj, President of the General Confederation of Moroccan Enterprises, CGEM.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm very proud to present the Moroccan private sector at this 14th edition of the US-Africa Business Summit under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God glorify him. My warmest thanks to the Corporate Council on Africa for choosing Morocco and the beautiful city of Marrakech to hold this important forum that gathers all American and African stakeholders around a stronger win-win and renovated US-Africa economic trade partnership. Referring to the elegant topic given to this edition, building forward together, makes perfect sense considering the challenging global context. Joining our forces through dialogue and cooperation is indeed essential to our representative countries' growth and prosperity, but also to face uncertainty. It is actually the only way to have visibility. Ladies and gentlemen, it goes without saying that the COVID-19 took its toll on the world economy, and the African economy was not spared. The pandemic generated the deepest global recession in decades, despite the tremendous effort of governments to counter the shock. I would like to seize this opportunity to commend the strong-held cooperation between African countries and the US support in the fight against COVID-19. This sense of solidarity should be reconfirmed now in the economic field. While the world is yet to fully recover from the socio-economic impact of the pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine conflict brought other major economic threats and an unprecedented rise of inflation under the pressure of food, energy, and major commodity prices. According to the World Bank, global growth is expected to fall from 5.7% in 2021 to 2.9% in 2022. Significantly lower than 4.1% that was anticipated in January. This situation could be a major threat to the effort undertaken by developed countries like the USA to build a resilient economic recovery and to relocate value chains. It could also compromise the outstanding progress made by the African continent in the last 2 decades. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the best time to provide that is now. If there are still doubts and questions about Africa's and Africans' ability to be at the center of the recovery dynamic, and the new industrial value chains, I will try to answer them with facts. Enabled by quick technological change and demographic transition, the continent enjoys a huge business potential that unfortunately remain underestimated. 1 in 4 citizens of the world will be African by 2050, representing a buying force of 2.5 billion consumers. Half of this population will be under 25 and very well connected. It is indeed a huge opportunity, but also a big challenge that we can only address by creating more and more jobs. The continent has also a large quantity of natural resources with an important potential of local transformation. These assets make Africa not only very competitive, but the continent of the future, especially if you take into consideration the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade, which provide immediately access to a market of 1.2 billion consumers. This free trade area will connect African market, knowing that trade between African countries only represents 16% of Africa's export trade. It will also accelerate the construction of new complementary industrial ecosystem linked to global value chains. Speaking about value chains, I believe that we should operate a shift in paradigms in identifying the right complementaries between African countries as well as between the United States and Africa, and start thinking beyond the made in Africa to build together the made with Africa. This dimension needs to be largely discussed. We will make sure to address it in detail this afternoon during a roundtable organized by CGM. Ladies and gentlemen, building forward together means looking in the same direction and sharing the same ambitions. Fair trade, free competition, more innovation for an inclusive and sustainable growth. Building forward together means also doing more business together under the leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. Morocco was a pioneer in believing and investing in Africa in multiple sectors: banking, insurance, infrastructure, real estate, energy, agriculture, with local actors and partners. Along with the public sector, private companies have indeed an essential role to play in solving Africa's biggest challenge, such as energy, food security, education, digital transformation, and health. Moroccan companies are ready to work hand in hand with American and African partners in order to accelerate this dynamic. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, energy is a crossroad of all sectors, and it is essential to building Africa's value chains. The continent has abundant renewable sources such as hydropower, wind, and solar that can be turned into a very competitive and green energy to cover the continent's need, but also to be exported. It is a huge opportunity to seize. On the other hand, empowering Africa in terms of food security is essential. It mainly starts with increasing agricultural productivity, transforming the raw product locally for higher added value creation, reducing barrier to trade, boosting competitiveness of agriculture businesses, and expanding the availability of agriculture and water technologies. The presence of leading companies playing the role of aggregators is fundamental to build production chains. OCP Africa, for instance, acted on this matter by becoming a strategic partner for African farmers. Another challenge is health and social security for the African population. The rapid demographic growth of the continent requires the upgrading of health system toward more coverage and more resilience. The sector of education and higher education in Africa offers multiple investment opportunities as well that the whole continent will benefit from. A well-trained human capital is fundamental to competitiveness factor in the development of sustainable industry. For instance, Morocco has succeeded in building strong ecosystem in aeronautics and automotive thanks to important and continuous investment in training programs for technicians and engineers. And finally, Africa is more and more the place for innovation and technology thanks to its youth and its energetic entrepreneurial population. According to a report of Google and the International Finance Corporation, the African internet economy has a potential to grow to $180 billion, roughly 5.2% of the continent's GDP, by 2025. Investment can be directed to building reliable internet access throughout the continent, to supporting African businesses in their digital transformation, and to funding African entrepreneurs and startups. Ladies and gentlemen, building forward together requires, before all, better knowing each other, trusting each other more, believing in our respective potential and capacities. Building forward together also means a mindset shift to stop seeing Africa as a problem and start seeing it as a solution. I truly believe that this is the basis for a 21st century US-Africa economic partnership. The world is changing faster than ever before. Now it's time to plan for the future. Now it's time to act together. As our American friend says, action speaks louder than words. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alge, and thank you to CGEM for being one of our private sector partners here in Morocco, helping us to organize the summit. I now have the honor of inviting to the podium Dr. Akimumi Adeshina, President of the African Development Bank.
Your Majesty, King Mohammed VI, may God help and bless him. Your Excellency, and my dear brother President Masisi of Botswana, Your Excellency, Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, we're delighted that she was able to join us here by video. That gave us a lot of energy looking forward to the meeting in Washington. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be here today for the US-Africa Business Summit, thanks to the courtesy of Corporate Council on Africa and my dear sister, Flori Liza, President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, a dear sister and a friend of Africa. I wish to congratulate His Majesty, King Mohammed VI, and the government of the Kingdom of Morocco for hosting this summit. Morocco is a great example of the power of vision, dynamism, and opportunities that exist in Africa. Morocco has the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, Nouazzazate, which was financed by the African Development Bank. The OCP of Morocco is the largest producer of phosphates in the world. A walk to Morocco's Tangier-Med port, a world-class port surrounded by industrial manufacturing parks, churns out over 350,000 Peugeot cars annually to Europe and to the rest of Africa. In Nigeria, the Dangote urea plant is the largest urea plant in the world, while its oil refinery is the largest single-train refinery in the world, an investment of $20 billion. Africa is primed to be the alternative source of supply of natural gas to help secure energy supplies to Europe following the Russian war in Ukraine that has disrupted energy supplies. Mozambique, with the support of the African Development Bank and private investors, is now poised to become the third largest supplier of natural gas in the world from a $24 billion investment. So from Nigeria to Ghana, Tanzania, Senegal, Morocco, and Kenya, Africa has some of the largest reserves of natural gas in the world. The future of electric vehicles will depend on availability of lithium ion. Africa has some of the largest lithium deposits in the world, from Democratic Republic of Congo to Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mali, enough to make Africa competitive with China and Chile in the race for supplying global value chains for electric cars. Africa holds huge opportunities in agriculture, with 65% of the remaining uncultivated arable land left to feed the world being in Africa. So, what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food in the world. And the size of the food and agriculture market in Africa will reach a whopping $1 trillion by 2030. If these are not enough to convince you to invest in Africa, let me try further. Africa's continental free trade area will become the largest free trade zone in the world, with a market size of $3.3 trillion, covering 54 countries with a population of 1.3 billion people. Renewable energy investment opportunities are immense, with 10 terawatts of solar, 350 gigawatts of hydropower, 150 gigawatts of wind, and 15 gigawatts of geothermal. The African Development Bank is mobilizing $20 billion for developing the desert to power in the Sahel, which will power the economies of 11 countries with solar and become the world's largest solar zone. From DRC, Morocco, Namibia, and Botswana, huge opportunities exist for green hydrogen, the fuel for the future. Africa, ladies and gentlemen, therefore offers a very profitable investment destination. Savvy investors know if you're not invested in Africa, you are really missing out on the world's leading investment opportunities frontier. And investors are paying attention, a lot of attention to Africa. The number of private equity funds in Africa grew from only 12 in 1997 to 150 by 2020. I am very positive about Africa's investment opportunities, and so should you. In 2020, a survey conducted by the African Private Equity and Venture Capital Association found that about 45% of limited partners expect returns in Africa to outperform those in emerging markets and developed markets. Over the next 10 years, 60% of limited partners indicated that they plan to increase allocations to Africa in the next 3 years. I really believe that this is the time for U.S. investors to rapidly move and invest massively in Africa. There's always a first mover advantage, and opportunities wait for no one. The U.S. foreign direct investment to Africa in 2020 was $47.5 billion. Now, while this is great and while this is significant, there is a lot of room for expansion, as the foreign direct investment from the United States to Africa represents only 5.2% of U.S.'s global foreign direct investment. President Biden's Build Back Better World is an excellent policy, and it can help a long way in tilting more U.S. private sector investments to Africa. It is time to refresh, re-engage, and reinvest in Africa. And as you do, let me just say it's important to base investment decisions in Africa on facts, not fiction or perceptions. Perception is not reality. Think of the following. In 2020, Moody's Analytics performed a 10-year cumulative assessment on global infrastructure debt default rates by region. It found that infrastructure loans perform worse in Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Oceania. Africa was the region with the second lowest cumulative default rate after the Middle East. Proof, again, that infrastructure as an asset class in Africa is solid, secure, and profitable. And that's why the African Development Bank invested over $44 billion in infrastructure in Africa in the last 6 years, from energy, transport, digital infrastructure, water, and sanitation. And we are the largest investor in infrastructure in Africa among all multilateral financial institutions. That is also why Africa 50, that I have the honor of chairing its board, it's investing in commercially viable infrastructure, which has demonstrated that pension funds and sovereign wealth funds can profitably invest in infrastructure in Africa. Africa 50 has established the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, a private equity fund, to raise $500 million from institutional investors. This fund, which expects to reach a first closing this year, presents an excellent opportunity for U.S. institutional investors. I urge you to invest in it. The African Development Bank is already working very closely with several U.S. agencies to help promote greater investments by U.S. in Africa, including Prosper Africa, Power Africa, United States Development Finance Corporation, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, it's good to see you, Alice, upright, as well as the U.S. Trade Development Agency. I would like to thank the U.S. Corporate Council on Africa for its excellent platform and for the robust engagement of the U.S. private sector, building connections of U.S. private sector to Africa. The Africa Investment Forum, organized by the African Development Bank and its partners, the European Investment Bank, the Afri-Exim Bank, Africa 50, the Trade and Development Bank, whose president also here, the Development Bank of South Africa, and the Africa Finance Corporation is showing the way for investors into Africa, curating deals and closing deals. In 3 years, the forum has helped to attract $110 billion US of investment interest into Africa. Africa is ready. The US is ready. Let us turn conversations into commitments. Let us turn commitments into investments. Let us build forward together, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adeshina, for your very inspiring remarks. You always inspire us to what we can do and accomplish. Well, I am delighted that CCA and the Kingdom of Morocco are co-hosting the U.S.-Africa Business Summit, our 14th summit, starting today in Marrakech. I warmly welcome all of you to this beautiful city, and thank you, each of you, for taking the time to join us. I would like to acknowledge in a special way His Excellency Mokgweetsi Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, who has honored us with his participation in our summit. We are also privileged, thank you, sir. We are also privileged to host a high-level U.S. government delegation led, as you heard earlier, by Alice Albright, the CEO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I want to give a special warm welcome to CEOs and executives of CCA member companies and other companies, both American and African, who have come here to this summit because they believe in the promise of a stronger U.S.-Africa economic relationship. And they believe in the role each one of us can and must play to realize that promise. This year's summit, entitled Building Forward Together, will explore a renewed commitment by both public and private sector stakeholders to building stronger U.S.-Africa trade, investment, and commercial ties as we emerge from unprecedented health and economic challenges. I am deeply grateful to our sponsors, our generous sponsors, and our media partners, without whom we could not have organized this summit. I will have the privilege to mention them by name during the next few days, but it would take probably more than a minute or two if I had to go through all. But thank you so much. Know that each of you are truly appreciated for your support. Each one of you during these challenges times have shown and highlighted your commitment to CCA's mission of providing access, connections, and insights that advance U.S.-Africa trade, investment, and business, and help your businesses succeed on the continent. Our objective is to enable you to connect during the summit with government and private sector, African and U.S. decision makers over the course of these 3 days, and to deliver the insights and the connections and the access that you need to move your businesses and your organizations forward. Whatever your vision for building forward together the U.S.-Africa partnership is, I promise that this summit will be worth your time. And again, I thank all of those who have delivered remarks, excellent remarks, and we will transition now to the portion of the opening plenary that provides a scene setter for the summit, a view from the angle and perspective of the private sector and from our partner, Africa 50, who has a continental view about critical issues like infrastructure, which Dr. Adeshina just talked about. We thank you again for being here, for joining us at this summit, and we look forward to your participation throughout the next 3 days. Thank you.
We ask all attendees to please remain in your seats while the distinguished scene setter, moderator, and panelists come up onto the stage to take their seats. As we begin the Scene Setter Plenary, Building Forward Together, we invite you to watch a video from our 2022 US-Africa Business Summit partner, Africa 50. We now welcome to the podium Alain Ebobisse, CEO, Africa 50, to deliver his introductory remarks.
Thank you. Excellency President Masisi of Botswana, honorable members of the government of the Kingdom of Morocco, especially my brother Minister Nasser Bourita, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be with you this morning, and I would like to thank the Corporate Council on Africa and its president, my sister President and CEO Floris de Olizer, for giving me the floor and Africa 50 the opportunity really to partner with the CCA for the 14th edition of the US-Africa Business Summit. This year, the event has a special flavor, firstly because it's held in Africa 50 host country, which is Morocco, which is a true gateway to Africa, Morocco really, and also because the event is taking place the day after Africa 50 General Shareholders Meeting, which we held yesterday, and then where we discussed with our 29 African country shareholders, including the Kingdom, we discussed very important issues relevant to Africa's development, and infrastructure was front and center in those discussions. But perhaps most importantly, the event has a special flavor because it is occurring at a time when there is a sense of urgency to address many African challenges. The world is facing a myriad of successive shocks, and while these challenges greatly affect Africa, they also revealed, in my opinion, even further the continent's unique strength, which, if adequately leveraged, could propel the continent to new prosperity. Africa is at an inflection point. Its real GDP in 2021 rose actually by 6.9%, which shows that our continent is on the road to recovery, even though we face some challenges today, and the GDP growth is expected to decelerate this year, according to the African Development Bank. But the fundamentals of Africa remain strong. Pre-COVID, 6 out of 10 fastest growing economies in the world were in Africa. Our population growth, our strong urbanization, our vast human and natural resources can be leveraged to provide new investment opportunities to accelerate the continent's development, while also generating attractive returns to investors. Let's not forget that. Africa is indeed moving forward. We must support this momentum and achieve higher and more inclusive growth across the continent. Infrastructure, which is the focus of our investment at Africa 50, present a unique opportunity for first movers, as my chairman, Dr. Kimwumi Adesina, mentioned earlier. The catalytic role of infrastructure as a driver of social economic development has never been more glaring. We must turn the crisis into opportunity to help accelerate Africa's growth. At Africa 50, we have used our pioneering spirit to implement solutions that help address Africa's infrastructure challenges by developing new models of partnerships between the private sector and our 29 African country shareholders. For example, we invested in the landmark projects such as our portfolio of 6 solar projects totaling 400 megawatts in the Bemban Solar Park in Egypt and the 420 megawatt Nakchigal hydropower plant in Cameroon. Both projects are generating developing impact, but also attractive returns to investors. This is the story of Africa. We invested in Azura Edo Power Platform in Nigeria, a gas-fired plant, which owns several operational power plants in Africa. We developed the Marikunda Power Plant in Senegal, which will be converted into gas as soon as the gas arrives in Senegal for cleaner fuels. Africa 50 also invested in the continent's ICT ecosystems, such as data centers and internet service providers that are helping concretize the opportunity to connect the next 1 billion users in Africa who currently do not have access to broadband connectivity. This investment, added to the Kigali Innovation Kigali Innovation City project that we are developing with Rwanda Development Board in Rwanda will help attract foreign tech investment in Africa, creating wealth, fostering innovation capabilities, and equipping African countries with the right modern infrastructure to support a digital transformation. Africa 50 is also involved in some transformational projects, regional projects, such as building the road, the Two Congo Bridge project, which is a bridge linking the cities of Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo. This project, which is being developed under a PPP scheme, has triggered a lot of interest from global entities, including the US in the United States. USDFC has expressed interest in supporting us on this project. These are just a few examples of projects that we have invested in. I wanted to give a sense that there are a number of projects which we're investing in Africa, which are delivering impact and are also generating good returns for investors. But what we want now, and we must do now, is we need to scale up and speed up project delivery. And for that, we need to strengthen our partnerships with institutions, government, the private sector, and project developers, both within Africa and also globally. This is why this business summit comes at a very critical time. We want to increase our collaboration with partners who believe in Africa more than ever. And let me just give you 3 opportunities to partner with US partners. First, project development. Africa 50 has an exciting partnership with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, where we are leveraging our respective expertise and in various sectors to prepare projects, de-risk them, and bring them to bankability to attract private investment. So Alice Albright was there. I will be meeting with Alice, but her team is doing a fantastic job. We'll move forward on this partnership to show that Africa and the US are working very closely in the infrastructure space. Climate finance is another opportunity to partner. Africa has tremendous renewable energy reserves, whether it's hydro, wind, geothermal, and solar. Africa 50 recently joined the African Development Bank to launch the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which aimed to raise $500 million of early-stage capital for project development and project preparation, with the goal to generate up to $10 billion in investment opportunities. This is an alliance that the African Development Bank is spearheading, but a number of US entities have expressed interest. We are talking to USDFC, to the Rockefeller Foundations. So again, another opportunity to partner with US entities. And finally, for us at Africa 50, we believe that the game changer in infrastructure investment will be US institutional investors, African institutional investors, global institutional investors, really looking at Africa infrastructure as an asset class which can provide impact and return. So by mobilizing more institutional investors' capital for African infrastructure through increased market insight, deal support, but also by offering the right investment vehicles, we believe this can make a difference. That's why Africa 50 established a new fund, the Africa 50 Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. Dr. Akimumi Adesina mentioned this earlier. We provide with this fund opportunity for US institutional investors and indeed African institutional investors to come in and have exposure to Africa infrastructure. Finally, let me mention the President Biden's Build Back Better World initiative and the launch recently of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment at the G7 Summit last month. These are strong signals that embody the US and the world realization that there is a real opportunity in expanding investment in Africa at scale. The US-Africa Business Summit is a great facilitator to make this happen, and I congratulate the Corporate Council on Africa for its success. Africa has 60% of the world's unutilized available cropland, while producing only 10% of the world's agricultural produce. So agriculture should be a major growth driver over the next few years, surpassing mining and metals. Africa also has the world's largest reserves in several strategic minerals, as well as the largest untapped hydropower and renewable energy resources. And finally, infrastructure with annual financing gap estimated to go between 68 billion and 108 billion is arguably the most significant investment opportunity in Africa, and certainly the one most important for accelerating growth. Africa 50 is eager to partner with you to invest in Africa infrastructure and build a stronger Africa forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ebobise. We now invite you to watch a video from one of our sponsors, Morocco's OCP Group. With a presence on 5 continents, OCP is a leader in plant nutrition and the world's largest producer of phosphate-based fertilizers. We now welcome Jennifer Zabasaja of Bloomberg News, who will moderate the Scene Setter plenary.
Is my mic on? Hello? Oh, there we go. Thank you. I was like, I can shout, but I don't think you guys want me to. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, as was mentioned. Thank you to Africa 50 and the Corporate Council on Africa for allowing me to be here and represent Bloomberg News from New York. I'm really fortunate to be joined on stage by these 3 men who are representative of the private sector and really, I think, key to when we talk about building forward together this relationship with the US and Africa, going to be key and represent key industries. And so I wanted to give you all a chance to introduce yourself to the audience, because I know a bit about you, but before we get into this conversation about what the private sector can do at this inflection point, as was mentioned earlier, I want you to introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit of background. Kevin, you can start, about what Pfizer specifically is doing to help build forward together, build this relationship between the US and African continent forward.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jennifer, and the CCA for the invitation to speak today. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Let me start by saying that at Pfizer, we remain committed and steadfast in our mission to deliver breakthroughs that change patients' lives. We have about 920 colleagues that support Pfizer across Africa in collaboration with healthcare professionals, communities, and governments to change the lives of millions of people across the African continent. Thank you.
And Salvador, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you, Jennifer. First of all, our gratitude to CCA and to the Moroccan government for hosting this event. After 2 years of virtual meetings, it was overdue to have this opportunity to connect in person. I represent Visa, which is a global company. I'm sure many of you probably have a card in your wallet. And Visa is deeply committed to support Africa. We see immense opportunities, challenges, but as we heard from the Vice President, from President Adesina, there's plenty to be done. Visa has been investing over the past few years in expanding our footprint. We currently have 11 offices throughout the continent, which 30 years ago we had just one in South Africa. We have expanded new offices in Ethiopia, in DRC, in Sudan. And I will mention other examples of specific actions, initiatives we're doing here. I would just like to put in perspective the importance of digital transformation for Africa. Every country in the world is investing on that. Our hope is that in this event we can really build stronger public-private partnerships, and you count with Visa on the digital transformation piece, which is very important to really achieve resilient economies in the world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Salvador, and we'll definitely get into that. And just finally, Ilias, I'd love for you to jump in. I did want to ask, did you make that video? That was an OCP video.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege for me as OCP's Managing Director in charge of corporate strategy, sustainability and innovation to take part in this plenary session of the 2022 US-Africa Business Summit. We've just seen the short video presenting my company OCP and our commitment to sustainable agriculture and global food security. We're a Moroccan company, an African company based in Morocco, present in the 5 continents, but especially devoted to Africa and African agricultural development. We're very proud of our long-standing relationship with farmers across the continent, supporting green revolutions in Africa. And across the Atlantic, we have also a long-standing history of partnership with our American US partners and working with farmers, improving performance of agriculture. So if you allow me a few minutes, I would like to maybe elaborate a little bit more on the importance of agriculture in the current context and for the development of Africa. Of course, when it comes to African development, each sector represented here today have their contribution to make for African prosperity. But none is perhaps as critical in the current situation as food and agriculture. Beyond the role of agriculture in ensuring food security of the continent, which is a big challenge in the current situation, as we all know, agriculture is critical to the development of Africa. It employs 2/3 of the continent's population. And in certain countries, it represents up to 50% of total GDP. So it's a key sector for development in Africa. Yet the continent is still a net importer of food. The import bill is around $45 billion currently, and in the current situation, really food security becomes a pressing challenge. Food prices are increasing. They are expected to increase by 23% in this year, according to the World Bank. They have already risen in 2021, almost 30%. And the problem is that farmers are not benefiting from this increase in prices because the cost of inputs already is also increasing. Let me take an example. For example, because of disruptions in the supply chains and the sharp increase in energy prices, the cost of ammonia, which is a major input for nitrogen fertilizers, was multiplied by 4 over the course of 2021. So these are really big issues that require strong action from stakeholders. We at OCP believe that all stakeholders should really join efforts to bring solutions on the short term and also on the long run. So,
do you believe, is that you saying you believe the private sector needs to be involved in this solution?
Well, yes. Well, as far as food security is concerned, and in our sector, our industry in particular, for example, let me give an example of what we've done to respond to this challenging situation we're living currently. We've started increasing our capacities 10% this year. We fast-tracked a certain number of expansion projects that were due next year. So we are adding, for example, 3 million tons of fertilizers at the end of this year. And specifically for Africa, we've been one of the first stakeholders to commit to dedicate a certain volume to Africa, which used to be the market that was served last whenever there is a tension in supply. So we dedicated 1 million ton per year to Africa. And today, still in the current situation, still more than 20% of our output goes to Africa. That translates our commitment to the development of the agriculture in the continent. And just yesterday, we announced our largest ever fertilizer relief program, consisting in 550,000 tons of fertilizers, a mix of donation and discounted price sales, building on our knowledge of the needs of the continent in terms of fertilizer. We are capable today of funneling this program to target really smallholder farmers where we can have more impact.
Right, and thanks, Ilyas, for that. And that is the African private sector perspective. Salvador, maybe you can get into the importance of the U.S. private sector being involved in some of the solutions that are here now, and what Visa has seen is actually working on the ground.
Thank you, Jennifer. Super important for U.S. companies to be present here and continue and expanding our presence in Africa. We heard loud and clear from Vice President Harris the commitment that the current administration has with the continent. We are competing with many other countries, and this competition will increase as we face also a new geopolitical order in the world. Now, more than ever, U.S. companies have to be investing and expanding our presence in Africa. Why? I think we heard loud and clear as well from the previous panel, all the opportunities that Africa has. Allow me just to mention a couple of them. I don't want to be too repetitive, but Africa now has the largest free trade area in the world, right? With 1.2 billion population, plenty to build, to expand. By 2050, a quarter of the population, right, will be here with very favorable demographics. Future growth for any company should be looking at Africa. Despite the challenges that we have with the current situation, food insecurity, supply chain disruptions, Africa recovered very rapidly from the recession in 2020. As far as I know, the economic growth forecasts are still solid, 4% last year, around 4% this year. So Africa is a very resilient country. Africa knows how to handle crisis. It's used to crisis. And I think it's a really good opportunity for US companies like us to really think about the strategy. And what we have realized is we have to customize business strategies, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all for a multinational to replicate what we do in Europe, in Asia Pacific, or in Latin America. We need customized business strategies. That is what Visa has been doing over the past few years.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us, Salvador? I mean, what does that look like, especially when you consider, you just said there's a lot of competition from other countries. What does that look like, customizing for the various countries on this continent in the Visa perspective?
Thank you. And I was going to go there because probably it doesn't say much if I don't illustrate it with an example.
Yeah.
We realized that working with traditional financial institutions doesn't work in Africa, right? We all know the importance of mobile money in Africa, how it has been one of the legacies for the world on really transforming mobile phones into a very powerful means to conduct digital payments. Africa leapfrogged thanks to mobile phone. And that's what we're doing. We are partnering with non-traditional players that probably in any other part of the world we wouldn't do it. And these are basically mobile network operators like Safaricom. We have developed a partnership with Safaricom in Kenya to really allow further international transactions go beyond the domestic payment system that M-Pesa in concrete has built in Kenya, and really integrate local with international platforms like us. That's just to give you an example of how we have to think about game changer strategies to be successful in Africa.
And Kevin, jump in here, because especially when we think about the health of the continent coming off of, hopefully coming off of a pandemic, an epidemic, is it about customization when it comes to healthcare? How is Pfizer thinking about sort of making sure that the continent as a whole is healthy in order to move forward, as we've been talking about?
Thank you, Jennifer. For years, research has shown that there's a strong direct correlation between health and the economy. Ultimately, a healthier population contributes to a stronger local economy, and in turn, a stronger local economy contributes to a healthier population. Healthier workers are more likely to show up at work, are more productive when they are at work, are better physically and mentally, and are more likely to engage in education and skills training. Therefore, a larger and healthier workforce translates into substantial economic benefits across the countries. Now, how do we validate that? In 2020, McKinsey conducted an analysis on almost 200 countries to identify the different health challenges and opportunities that each would face over the next 2 decades. What's interesting is that their analysis showed, particularly for sub-Saharan Africa, that we would have 3.3 million more young adults to contribute to the workforce by 2040. That is provided if the health of the children could be improved by better childbirth practices, treatment of lower respiratory tract infections, and prevention of malaria and diarrhea. This larger labor force would contribute over a third of the overall 0.5% faster GDP growth that they would expect every year. Now, Pfizer, to that point, has one of the most prominent core values, which is equity. And it's this equity that drives our people every single day. We believe that all people deserve access to high quality, safe, and effective healthcare solutions. The Accord for a Healthier World, which we recently launched in partnership with African countries, the Gates Foundation, and in collaboration with organizations like UNECA, aims to close this health equity gap for 1.2 billion people living in 45 lower income countries across the world. Now, the Accord is a real game changer. It's the first of its kind. It's aimed at providing access to all of Pfizer's patented, high-quality medicines and vaccines that's currently available in the US and the European market on a not-for-profit basis to the 45 low-income countries. As part of this effort, we've committed to provide our patented current and future products on a not-for-profit basis to these 45 countries, which are the most vulnerable when one looks at the health equity gap. We believe that by supplying these products to these 45 low-income countries, we'll be able to close the health equity gap. Now, providing the product is just the first step. Pfizer has gone beyond that in collaborating with our partners, our Accord partners, to see how we can actually remove barriers related to supply, logistics, storage, and regulatory environments to ensure that people in these 45 countries have access to innovative medicines and vaccines. And just one other point, 33 of these 45 countries are actually in Africa.
So where are we seeing that working, and how has Pfizer been able to navigate a lot of the regulatory challenges that we know come depending on which country you're speaking to?
We've got 5 advanced markets, let's call them pilot markets, which are Malawi, Uganda, Rwanda, Senegal, and Ghana. And we're in the process of using these 5 piloted countries as a test case so that we can then build in terms of sharing our best practices going forward. I'm very pleased to announce that we've just signed the draft supply agreement with Rwanda. We have conducted training for healthcare professionals in Rwanda, and we actually do have product on the ground in Rwanda as we speak. So,
specific product?
Correct. The medicines and vaccines in the country.
Are we seeing that translating on the ground yet, Kevin?
Yes, we are. Obviously, there are specific issues, as I've mentioned, relating to supply. Sorry, let's call it supply chain, logistics, what we often refer to as the last mile. And Pfizer has got specific initiatives around it, like the drone campaign, where we actually use drones to get essential vaccines to those rural outlying areas.
And I'd love, because all of you are really sort of insinuating that you within the private sector have been able to navigate a lot of the challenges, as you mentioned, but also work with the public sector to make a lot of this progress that you're talking about happen. What are those conversations like? I mean, Ilyas, maybe you can start for us. What is the conversation like with the government, and how do you navigate some of those challenges that inevitably do come up?
Well, you know, as far as food security is concerned, as I said, and thanks to the current situation, it's still an opportunity to bring food security on top of the global agenda, and to bring attention to this critical issue. Because if we take a step back and look at the global food security situation, in African, of course, being a good example, the situation on the long run is still challenging. You know, the food security is bending under the pressure of deep trends of a growing population and a decrease in the available arable lands. The arable lands per capita will decrease by 24% between today and 2060. So there is clearly a pressing need to increase productivity, and we think that Africa is not part of the problem. It's been mentioned in one of the opening remarks earlier. It's not part of the problem, but really part of the solution. Now, how to address that? Of course, there are, a few solutions I would like to elaborate on in my words, but a public-private cooperation is necessary. And let's take, for example, what we did in Ethiopia. It was one of the first countries where we implemented our approach of soil health driven fertilization, and we partnered very early on with the government authorities to deploy soil mapping together, by the way, with the Gates Foundation. And based on that, we created adapted fertilization formulas and tested them on the field. And then it was adopted as new products more adapted to soil health and more adapted to the crops. So, and the result is spectacular because yields increased by 40%. The fertilizer is cheaper than the fertilizer the farmers used to apply, and the volume of or the adoption by the farmer increased twofold. Volumes in Ethiopia increased twofold. So this is basically one of the examples where a coordinated approach, public-private, can have a deep impact and really improve the productivity of agriculture across all the country.
Salvador, could you jump in? Because, especially from the US perspective, how do you come in, and you mentioned Kenya earlier, and have those conversations that Ilias was just alluding to? How do you know which issues to target first, considering the myriad of things to tackle today?
Definitely governments, I think for every industry, play a key role. For us, it's no exception. Typically, central banks are looking at our business, and we are engaging with central banks all across Africa. I think the challenge is when you look at the opportunity, but also the challenge, and allow me here to bring some indicators to put it in perspective. I was looking at the latest World Bank survey, the Findex survey, which is a demand-side survey made with citizens all over the world. Africa now has more access to bank accounts than electricity, 55% according to the latest Findex report. It doesn't include all African countries, the sample of countries, that's the average. Some countries are much higher, like Kenya. And mobile money has been increasing, about 33%. These indicators improved significantly over the last decade. Still a lot of room to go, particularly if we also look at indicators such as access to internet, which unfortunately Africa still lags far behind. It's about a third of the population that has access to internet. And these are the areas where we need to collaborate, to partner with governments, because a single player, single company won't have the impact if we don't do this together with the government. And in our case, we have a win-win proposition because informality in Africa, like in many other developing countries, is high. If governments want to improve revenue collection, which obviously it's a high priority these days, in addition to other benefits like building more inclusive societies, financial inclusion, we need to tackle informality. There's no other way to do it than moving transactions from cash to digital. And we have a natural opportunity, common ground of collaboration with governments. The challenge is how you build a big picture where you have collaboration from many government agencies, because it's not only one, where there is a clear vision on where a country wants to go in digital transformation in general, but particularly on payments. That's one of the areas that we're always engaging governments and trying to support and build this vision.
What are some of the questions that they ask you, in particular, when you bring something like that up? Because you mentioned the informal sector is still predominant on this continent. So what is it that they come to Visa and to the private sector asking?
Well, technology is an important one, and I was mentioning before, obviously, the challenge that we have with apps, right? The apps and smartphones are really nowadays the most powerful tool for digital transformation. You can run your life. I think most of us are becoming increasingly dependent. You can do everything pretty much from your phone. We still have room for improving adoption of smartphones in Africa, but that's one of the issues that we discuss from a technology perspective. Also from a national agenda, and I think it's a very valid and legitimate concern that governments in Africa want to expand and improve the local players, right? And ensure there is, even from a national security perspective, that they have a well-developed domestic payments infrastructure, right? And we want to emphasize, and allow me to make that clear in this forum, that we shouldn't see US versus domestic players as a zero-sum game, that unfortunately sometimes it happens. Let's be honest. That's not the discussion. The discussion is how we can build together stronger domestic players, build stronger ecosystems, and this becomes a win-win proposition for US companies and for the development of the local players. I can expand more on what we're seeing on fintech in particular. That's a clear example on how we are supporting, enabling that domestic environment.
Are you seeing that with benefiting small businesses and larger businesses as well?
Totally, and thank you for bringing that perspective, because that is critical for what I was mentioning. Informality is higher, obviously, with micro, small, and medium-sized business. We realize that we're not going to be successful in the penetration of digital payments if we don't tackle that segment. And as a corporation, in 2020, our chairman and CEO announced a commitment to digitally enable 50 million small and medium businesses. We're on target. It's a 5-year commitment. It's not done alone by Visa. Obviously, we need a lot of partners, local partners, who can help us bring the technology, the solutions for those small businesses. And that's exactly what we're doing, together with 2 more things allow me to bring here. Women own businesses is key for Africa to prosper. The US government has great initiatives in that respect. We are supporting those programs, and we want to do more to enable more women-owned businesses to be digital. And the other component is obviously building the digital and financial skills that the population needs to really cope with this new digital world. We also have initiatives there. We need local partners to amplify, and we have content, but we need to amplify and distribute that content. So those would be the key areas: digital enablement, women entrepreneurship, and digital and financial skills that we see are key for addressing micro, small, and medium businesses.
And I'm glad you brought up small and medium businesses, because Ilyas, I do want to get to speak to you about that, especially when it comes to farmers. But Kevin, I did want to talk about this public-private partnership, especially when it comes in the health space specifically. Talk about what is working well for Pfizer, and sort of what are the gaps that are still needed within the health sector to ensure that this is a healthy economy, this is a healthy population that is able to go in and work and produce a lot of what we're talking about here today.
One of the areas that we are focused on, and as far as policy reform is concerned within the healthcare space, is advancing trade investment and technology in Africa, as we believe it will have tremendous potential for economic growth, prosperity, and public-private initiatives or partnerships. We believe that there is no better time to accelerate trade and investment in Africa now. In terms of policy reform, Pfizer is working both with the Africa Medicines Agency as well as the African Union to basically fast forward regulatory harmonization, reliance, and collaboration with government so that we can have a positive impact on people getting access timeously to medicines and vaccines in Africa. Now, specifically with regards to the Accord, which I mentioned is a game changer, Pfizer will work with local governments and will also collaborate and provide assistance so that we can reduce the time it actually takes to get these medicines and vaccines to those respective countries in Africa.
Well, and you mentioned policy reform. I mean, what specifically do you mean when you say policy reform when it comes to the health sector? Because it's different depending on which country you look at, right? So what is it that Pfizer is focused on?
Specifically, if we look at it from two perspectives, as I mentioned, one is regulatory, because it means that medicines and vaccines can become available much quicker in those countries. And I would say the second most important one will refer to procurement practices. There's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy in certain countries where it prevents us getting our vaccines, our much needed vaccines like the COVID-19 Comirnaty vaccine to those countries. So if we can get some collaboration and cooperation with these African governments, we can actually then assist them in getting our products there sooner.
Is that where the African Continental Free Trade Agreement comes in? Is that what you're alluding to?
Absolutely. That is one of the milestones in terms of improving access in Africa.
Does anyone else have comments on that? Because I know that a lot of people have talked about this free trade agreement. I mean, what does it need to look like? What does it need to, what is the shape of it in order to benefit each of your industries at this point in time? Ilyas, do you want to jump in?
Of course, maybe before that I would like to go back to that question you just raised on also how we are addressing in our industry smallholder farmers, right? As part of our approach in of course, development of agriculture in Africa. You see, as I said, the transformation of food systems and agriculture in Africa cannot be done without the contribution of smallholders farmers, who account for almost 40% of the global food production. So in Africa, the share is even more important. And we learned through our experience in Africa that it's not sufficient to just show how the application, for example, of best practices and fertilizers improves yields. In many cases, the farmers just don't have any incentive to increase their yields because they have many other bottlenecks, you see, that we need to address in a holistic way, right? So this is why the approach, especially in Africa, and here I think we are somehow reinventing also our model led by this African experience. The whole approach is centered on the farmer, you see. So we address it as an ecosystem, and we, for example, in certain cases, we have to partner with banks, for example, to provide financing solutions for the farmer, because that's the bottleneck. In certain cases, we have also to partner with the off-takers to buy their crops, and that would free up and streamline, I would say, the value chain. So we have many flagship programs centered on this concept. AgriBooster being one of them, Al-Mutmir another one. These are flagship programs that today already covered 1 million, more than 1 million farmers in the continent, and we're still working on this through our subsidiary OCP Africa. So yes, what we call farmer-centric approach in development of agriculture is key. The second one is what I mentioned earlier. Second one of our, as part of our vision for development of agriculture is the soil health approach. That's the example I gave for Ethiopia, for example.
Right. What are the challenges to doing that, especially because, as you mentioned, you're transforming the way that this has been done for years, for centuries. So what are the challenges that OCP is running into implementing this on the ground?
Well, I'm glad to hear also my fellow panelists, each in their sector, talking about customization. Well, here again, in agriculture, I think customization is the key word. There is no off-the-shelf solution, right? So the idea is that solutions should be customized, and I would like to highlight one element that is often overlooked, and it could be an opportunity for partnership between US players and African players. I'm thinking of R&D and innovation. I think in our industry in particular, where solutions should be customized and cannot really be standard solutions applied everywhere, we need also dedicated capabilities in terms of R&D and innovation for the continent. Let me take an example. For example, the types of soils. The soils in Africa are completely different from soils in the northern hemisphere in the US or Europe. These are young soils, temperate soils. In Africa, we have tropical weathered soils where you cannot apply the same practices. So you need really specific research on that to understand soil, to understand the interaction between soil and plant and so on. And for this, you need capabilities localized in the continent.
Right. And let's just, before we close out, I'd love for each of you to sort of tackle, maybe share one point that you think we should all walk away from, especially when you think about your own perspectives that you've shared today from the private sector. You've all talked about customization. You've talked about how we need to rethink a lot of the models when we're moving into this continent. But maybe something that people can take away from today. Kevin, do you want to start?
Yeah. I think if we once again refer to an Accord for a Healthier World, and you look at the first 5 countries that have put their hand up to say these are advanced markets and we'd like to be part of the pilot, I think we invite other countries, other African leaders to also come forward and be part of this. And at the same time, we also extend an invitation to other companies in the healthcare space and other organizations that can collaborate and support so that we can actually roll this first of its kind initiative out on a global scale.
Wonderful. And Salvador, do you want to jump in?
Very briefly, because I know we're out of time. Resiliency, I think it's a great theme that cuts across all industries. I want to reiterate how important is the public-private partnership and the role that governments can play in terms of accelerating what we see as very necessary, which is payments digitization. And we are here to support, bring the best practices for governments across Africa to do this. We just opened a studio in Nairobi precisely to support African needs and really co-create, which is the word that we use, how to really customize solutions to the African context, and we are here to do that.
Customization. Ilyas, do you want to close us out?
Well, I'd like to emphasize really the fact that the same as it has been mentioned earlier on mobile payment, I think Africa here has really an opportunity to leapfrog the standard green revolutions that we had in the past, reinventing new models of development of agriculture, new sustainable models, right? And they have to be specific to the continent, and they require the commitment and cooperation between different stakeholders, not only public-private, but also within the private sectors. We should work in a value chain mode in order to make it this transformation happen. We are committed to that, and of course, this is the model we would like also to partner with any players who share the same vision.
Wonderful. Opportunity, rethinking, customization, re-engaging, and refresh. A lot of opportunity here. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this session. And thank you to Africa 50 and CCA for your time. Thank you.